Is a young NFC East receiver about to drop off the Dynasty radar? What third-year phenom should you be cautious about acquiring? And what's the best way to handle your rookie drafts if you already have a contending Dynasty squad? Plus, Steve Paratore, a four-time FFPC high-stakes Dynasty football champion, talks about rookie pick values, David Montgomery, Jamar Chase, and more, all live on YouTube right now. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Damn the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you, Rob, and greetings and salutations to all the Balkaholics and Farelliacs tuning in this evening here on YouTube. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I am your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is indeed the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Farrell, big, massive weekend, not only for fantasy football players as we get to see what happens in the NFL draft starting tomorrow, but obviously you are busy this weekend trying to get some of these guys new homes.
You know, I am, and we're going to talk about some homes new and reestablished tonight. You know, I would encourage the listeners, Balky, to remember that the NFL selection process runs through Saturday, and then Saturday night, follow on Twitter. You'll see players, the names that you were familiar with from their college days, who were undrafted for a number of reasons that we won't get into here, but still could be quality fantasy players. You know, sometimes I think that it's very much like these players are like birds on a wire. You evaluate these and those fly off and more fly in. But if you don't think because a player that you have targeted falls in draft stock, goes undrafted, that he's no benefit for fantasy. Things could be much, much different when he gets to camp. If you liked him as a player, you should like what he's going to do in the NFL if you liked him as a college player.
And look at the advantage of no draft capital invested in him. You're going to get him for free everywhere. So this is
That's
good news.
Exactly right. And, you know, tending, as we all look at the draft, and this happens in the NFL room as well, you know, you're creating your own mythology of what you see happening. You're looking into the future and you're trying to understand how it fits with you. But ball players that bring talent and skills to the field, those skills don't change just because they were not considered a draft pick. We could go on and on with the list of players that have contributed to fantasy football, even as rookies that were undrafted. Follow your players all the way through the draft. It's a very important process.
We will get to we'll investigate that thought more as throughout the program tonight. Also coming up on tonight's show, we're going to talk about a Pro Bowl player potentially finally moving out of the AFC West. More on that in a little bit. Who could be the sleeper running back of this year's rookie class? Maybe he's an undrafted free agent. And then Steve Paratore is going to talk Dynasty Fantasy Football with us, how he won 4 high-stakes FFPC Dynasty titles in his career, how he values rookie picks with contending teams, how he values them with not contending teams, and much more. All right, so a couple of things at the top of the show. The 2022 FFPC Best Ball Tournament goes live on Sunday. $200,000 grand prize, just $125 to enter that. The grand prize and the prize pool are doubled for 2022. No, not the pre anymore. We just have the post-NFL Dynasty startups available at myffpc.com/dynasty. Those go live on Sunday. All the orphans are sold out. Thank you, FFPC. players for buying all those up. No orphans left for the FFPC until next year. The Football Guys early bird promo going on for a $35 discount or $35 free team when you register before June 30th, draft before July 15th. You'll get a free $35 team added to your account. $1 million going off in the main event, $100 off your first team. $500 off each additional. Slow, live, and sit and go best ball options all at myffpc.com. And don't forget the Run to Daylight Championship and Draft Masters filling up at kffsc.com. And if you want to draft against me, I'll be drafting Sunday night in the KFFSC Run to Daylight. We have former world champ Jason Kahn and Aaron Laser. They'll be drafting in that. Of course, the former Kentucky main event champs, FPI, Petrie, and Larson, they're going to be in that draft, much more. That is going to be a fun draft. If you want to get something that the draft in a league, Farrell, that's going to get you set for drafting season, drafting against these guys who have had so much success, that's going to prep you and it's going to make you a better drafter in 2022.
Oh, Buggy, thank you for bringing that up. We always say that the best players play in Kentucky, and it gets you ready to take a swing at that $1 million in the FFPC in September. So August is Kentucky, FFPC is September, both the live events and then online and everywhere. In the KFFSC and the FFPC leading up to there. You're great to come in and support the league by playing. You're a very busy man. A shout out to all the kids and your missus that is on the recovery road at the moment. It's been very, very encouraging. And by the time we gather next Friday night, I bet she'll be even feeling better.
She might even jump in the broadcast with us. More coming up on what we're doing next Friday later on in the show. Stay tuned for that. Let's get into the fantasy flash, ladies and gentlemen. The Broncos have indeed officially signed Melvin Gordon to a one-year contract, according to Jordan Schultz on Twitter. Melvin Gordon, 29 years old, obviously had a decent season last year. 4.5 yards per carry on over 200 attempts, 918 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, and he only missed one game. Now, in that one game, Javonte Williams looked like a world beater. That probably will not be the case as long as Gordon is healthy this year. Now, Nathaniel Hackett is the new head coach in Denver. He obviously comes from a backfield in Green Bay that was pretty good at utilizing both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. So Javonte Williams probably going to be the 1A this year. But Melvin Gordon, don't forget about him. And a question about this from the chat, Hudson Kern-Reed, our resident Ivy professor, fantasy football player. How far should Javonte Williams now move down from his ADP before the Gordon signing? And I'll tell you right now, in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, which is just wrapping up here with all the live drafts being completed here, he was going at 109. He did fall to the 202 after the Gordon news. That was the latest he went. I got to imagine, Farrell, when Football Guys drafts start up on Sunday, obviously the Run to Daylight, he is going to be going lower than the 202. How far should he drop? Where would you draft him? Do you take him after the top 8 running backs are off the board, after the top 10, 12? How do you sort of like finesse your way into trying to find the sweet spot for Javonte Williams in high-stakes drafts?
Because of the best ball format, you can go ahead and stay with him in the second round. I never thought he was fit as a first-round draft pick. I always gave the side eye to that when I saw him moving in the first round. And that side eye became a permanent side eye because Darren tells us the mojo is a 1-9. And I just thought that was too early. You know that they're not going to turn this entire situation over to him. So consequently, there would be another back in there. Melvin Gordon is not the quitting kind, and you should not be the kind of owner that quits on Melvin Gordon. Gordon will go higher than where Darren has him now, which I'm sure is 9th and maybe as late as the 10th round. Both players will have a significant year with the talent and skills of Russell Wilson at the quarterback. And those numbers you gave for Gordon Balky, he now has become the steal of the early best ball drafters that were wise enough not to be the quitting kind on Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, and think about that too. I mean, all these people that were drafting early, envisioning this Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, Albert Okwuegbunam juggernaut with Javonte Williams, right? As like the co-pilot next to Russell Wilson. Well, now all of a sudden Melvin Gordon has edged his way into that cockpit, and he's going to have something to say about these carries. 1103 at running back 40 is where he was going. he will, as Farrell said, move up from there going forward. All right, let's go over to the East Coast. Mike Garafalo from the NFL Network says it doesn't seem very likely that the Giants will move on from Kadarius Toney in the near future. Garafalo says there's, quote, no doubt that the Giants have had conversations about Toney, but nothing's been materializing in the form of a trade with somebody else. The Giants had Kadarius Toney as their first-round pick last year, Dave Gettleman pick, and now it seems like they want to move back off him. And quite frankly, Farrell, and I think this is the lesson we can learn for fantasy football here. We know what Toney's able to do in a limited sample size, right? Once you demonstrate that skill, you own it, and he owns it. But if the team is trying to shop you around, what does that say about somebody who wants to invest in Kadarius Toney to be on their fantasy football team this year? It's shaky ground right now. And this is a guy that I think is as temperamental as they come as far as his boom bust value. Wide receiver 37 right now at the 809. And we'll see what the Giants do in the draft this weekend. If they end up going with some receivers, obviously Toney could be on his way out. I know they're talking about maybe trying to trade Darius Slayton as well. But Kadarius Toney, Farrell, I think he's more of a tease than a fantasy football asset at this point.
Bonky, I think you may be wrong for that. And you might want to rethink that before Sunday night, because I think this player in the 9th round is a very attractive ball player. You know, you've got a head coach moving over from the AFC Buffalo Bills that looks at this situation and experienced Tyreek Hill running past, through, and over all of his defenders. He's in a situation now where he's got a player that it's a far stretch to call him Tyreek Hill, but he flashes those skill set. And this is a player that proved it in the Southeastern Football Conference, the finest football conference of all time. And you know that in the second round, in 2021, this player was in a situation where time will wait for him. It wasn't going to wait for the head coach. It wasn't going to wait for the general manager who drafted him. But time would definitely wait for Kadarius Toney. And this is his time. I think he will have a very, very improved season. His flashes will come into real contribution in games. And I think this is a very, very good ball player where he's being drafted now. And if he were to be moved, he would be moved to a situation where he could continue to flourish. The great thing about fantasy football, no one's going to pay the price in trade. And, you know, our dynasty players know this better than anyone. No one's going to pay the price for a first-round draft pick coming off his rookie year without a defined role for him. Time will wait for Toney, and don't wait too long, Bulky. He won't be around much longer at that 8 and 9 pick.
And that's a good point, too, because in Kentucky, he'll obviously go higher. Wide receiver 37, I mean, he's kind of a borderline wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. So depending upon how my team shapes up, if I do go, running back heavy and I'm just firing wide receiver darts, Toney might make some sense there. We'll see what happens. I don't know which way I'm going to go. Let the draft come to me, as it were, on Sunday night. All right, so Zach Gelb, let's talk about him for a second. Zach Gelb is the host of the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. This came out just before we went on air here on Wednesday night. Zach Gelb was interviewing Darren Waller. The Raiders, according to Darren Waller, specifically told him he is not going to be traded. The full quote, they said that's not a thing that's happening, and there's no trade that's going to happen. Now, it was earlier rumored or reported on by Aaron Nagler from Cheesehead TV, who's been on my airwaves before. I respect him. He's been covered the Packers for a long time. And then Justice Mosqueda with Acme Packing Company also corroborated this report that the Packers and Raiders were working on a Waller trade. Now, I kind of it didn't seem right. The Packers don't seem like a team that would want to give up draft picks for, quite frankly, an older tight end, an affordable older tight end, but it just never seemed like this is something that Green Bay wanted to do. So I'm not surprised that this is not going to happen. But Farrell, as we look at Las Vegas this year, Devontae Adams is going to be a target monster. Hunter Renfrow is going to be a target monster. Darren Waller has been a target monster when he's been out there. Are you worried about one of those three players being a bust this year? Because Derek Carr can only pump the ball so many times every game.
Bucky, I have no worries, and I never live in fear when it's related to the Raiders. It's interesting that you give this breakdown from the Packers' perspective. I don't think there was any smoke or any fire here. Now, Darren Waller, we just referred to him as an older tight end, but you'll have to recognize that Darren Waller is very, very low mileage on that body, and he is an incredible athlete. You can look at him, he's one of the guys at tight end that truly passes the eye test. He's a perfect kind of ball player for what the Raiders offense. He's the true and natural man of this offense, Balky. And you talk about Carr and his recruiting of your beloved wide receiver Adams to the Raiders. But I think Adams could also look at this and say, look at the kind of routes I'll have to run now with this gentleman, Mr. Waller, clearing out the middle for me. And, Waller is also a key to what the coach wants to do with two tight ends. I don't know how often he'll do it, but he has Foster Moreau. All the great things come out of New Orleans. He's a product of Jesuit High School in New Orleans. I mean, this whole Waller thing is like an April Fool's joke that's gone bad for the whole month. And Raider fans, so you want to talk about worrying about targets. I don't know if it's possible to throw for 6,000 yards in a year, but if anybody's ever going to do it, it's going to come out of the AFC West. And the Raider fans and players like our great friend Brett Trumpauer, who love the Raiders and play all the fantasy football they can. Their eyes are to the horizon of the possibility of the unlimited ceiling for all these players. We've talked about the fact that in Renfro's case, we think less red zone, less touchdowns, but we're dealing with an unlimited ceiling. And that's the report that I've got on Waller for you as you continue there with Tanyan as your tight end.
Yeah, and I'll bring this up too, and it's something you brought up right at the start of that, Farrell. Darren Waller will turn 30 by the start of the NFL season. However, he has only played 6 years in the NFL. He's only played in 65 games in his career. Right. So definitely low mileage there. Good point as far as everything that you said about Darren Waller. All right, so let's bring in our guest tonight. Want to welcome him in right now, ladies and gentlemen. He is celebrating an anniversary, Farrell, because 2022 marks his 30th year of playing fantasy football. He obviously started before the internet. Magazines is where you get the projections. The USA Today was your source of all the stats of everything that happened every weekend. And of course, our guest scored his leagues by hand. In his home league, 25 years, 5 titles, numerous runner-ups in that. He stopped playing in it once he fell in love with the FFPC Dynasty format. He actually prefers the Superflex format due to the variations in lineup settings and the strategy that gets encompassed with that. He's a 6-time FFPC league winner. 4 of those championships are at the Dynasty level. You already follow him on Twitter at Steve Paratore. Please welcome in the headbanger himself. It is the one, the only, and the incomparable Steve Paratore. Thank you so much for making a little time for us tonight, Steve. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Balky. I think I'm out of here now. You covered everything. Thanks very much.
That's all we have, ladies and gentlemen.
I've still got material, and you're the first guest who's worn a sport coat. How fantastic this is!
Tonight, I just thought I have to look good. I figured wearing tights or something like that wouldn't work so good with this little bit of extra weight I'm carrying, that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Let's put on. A little bit warm in here tonight, but I'm feeling it. I'm feeling good tonight. So
good job, headbanger.
Right, thanks, guys.
All right, so I want to number one 2-part question right away for you, Steve. I want to know what you're doing for a living. Tell the FFPC listeners and viewers what you're doing for a living when you're not winning all these dynasty leagues. And then the second part of the question, Hudson Kern-Reeve has a question in the chat room. He wants to know where you think Breece Hall is going to go in redraft leagues this year. Breece Hall, who's obviously going to be probably, we don't know. I mean, he probably will be the number 1 running back drafted this year. Currently, I can tell you in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament, Breece Hall, his ADP was actually at running back 17 at the 312. Football guys, obviously that's redraft, carries a little bit of a different weight, a little bit different strategy there. So number one, what are you doing for a living, Steve? And then Breece Hall, where do you think he goes in drafts right now?
Paid work. I'm actually a regional sales manager. So I try to sell things. So that actually plays really well into working with Dynasty. So trying to work things out with that. So I'm a regional sales manager. I've been doing sales for about 30 years in the Mid-Atlantic area. I'm also an avid vegetable gardener. I'm a part-time, and also I love my craft beer. So those are a couple of things I like to do personally. Drinking beer, I like to kind of work to live. I like to live to work, not necessarily work to live. So I kind of try to mix the balance on that. And except for that, I'm also trying to always win dynasty leagues or fantasy football leagues. So it's kind of a part-time job for me right now as well. But it's the funnest job. I don't call it work. So it's
you can mix craft beer in with fantasy football pretty easily. It's
absolutely. Yeah, and again, I'm not much of a redrafter, but as far as I would think, I mean, yeah, I'm thinking late second round because people are just going to love him. If he falls to a spot like Buffalo or goes to Atlanta or one of these other hot trot spots, the last couple of years you've had some pretty top dog running backs, so you're thinking they're going to go pretty high. So probably late second, early third round, right about that. That's what I would think is a redrafter. So.
Yeah, Farrell, I'm on board with that. Late second sounds right to me for Breece Hall because whoever invests in him is going to want to give him the rock a lot right away. Late second, maybe even mid second as we get closer and closer to the start of the draft season, start of the main event season.
Sure, and as you talk to redrafts and Headbanger, we've already had so many redrafts, both classic leagues as well as best balls, but Breece Hall was a value in all of them. People say, oh, Commish, I don't want to draft this early. It's too early to draft. Well, that's when you get Breece Hall at the 5th and then the 4th and then the 3rd round. And you can still get him at those rounds before we move on. You will be the director, sir, of where he ends up in fantasy. And another rookie that we looked at last year in fantasy. And I mean, there was a true devotion amongst dynasty players for Jamar Chase. And, if you've got him on your dynasty team, good for you. You've got a prolific receiver and a number 1 target for many, many years to come. What would it take if you don't have him to acquire him?
Boy, yeah, as far as Jamar Chase, I have him in a couple of leagues. And to me, he's like kind of a unicorn. I mean, I think right now, at least this day and age, I think Jamar Chase, Jefferson, you've got Pitts, a little bit AJ Brown, maybe CeeDee Lamb. It's hard to change those unicorns. They're young, they're dynamic, they were productive in college. Most of them are good situations, a little bit less with Pitts. But, I mean, you've got Jamar Chase. My God, he's playing with his college quarterback. He's a first-round draft pick. He's got 4 more years under his rookie deal. He's got his quarterback for at least the next 3 years. Defense that's improving, running back with a little bit of mixing, getting a little bit older. But to me, Chase, don't even come talk to me. The only way I can trade him is in my super flex leagues if I've got decent wide receiver depth and I might need a quarterback, but it better be a quarterback in the top 5, top 6. You're going to want Chase. You're going to come to me. You're going to pay for him. Otherwise, he's out. Those kind of guys, forget about it. Chase in particular, like I said, Jefferson, Pitts, those are unicorns. They're just hard to find. I mean, it's like sometimes changing, you want a dollar bill. You don't give me 3 quarters and a couple dimes. You can't use those things. I hate that. So if you come to me, you want a stud, you better give me back an equal stud or something better, or you don't even come to the game because it's hard to do that. What are you going to give me 2 first-round draft picks? Then what are you going to do? You're going to hope to spin a draft pick to get a Chase, to get close? Nah, that's a little bit hard to do. So for me, a Chase kind of guy, those kind of guys, very hard to trade for, and very hard to trade away. I wouldn't want to trade them away.
You already captured the unicorn once, Steve. Why would you go off and try to go on the chase again to try to find him? It's not worth it. Even if you have more men to cover more ground to try to find that unicorn again, not worth it. I'm totally with you on that. It's funny because the former co-host of the show, Dave the Dizzle Gerzak, always used to say, like when Christian McCaffrey was at the peak of his powers, when Todd Gurley was at the peak of his powers, he said those guys, I think he said you never want to use the word untradeable.
Yeah.
But they're the next closest thing to that, because it's so difficult, especially the FFPC where you got you got to cut down to 16. It's so tough to get full return back on those types of players. Like you scratch and claw to try to get those players. And then once you have them, you just enjoy putting them in your lineup every single week. Now, a player you may not enjoy that with this year is David Montgomery. It looks like the Bears are going to be rebuilding. In fact, their new GM, Farrell, who's the new GM there? I always forget his name. Ryan
Poles.
Ryan Poles has set his team up for success in 2023. Maybe not so much in 2022. Is that caused, knowing that, Steve, are you a little bit nervous about having David Montgomery on your team this year? Is it maybe time to see what you can get for him on the open market in your dynasty leagues right now?
Yeah, to me, I'm kind of the opposite. I mean, I look at a guy he's in a pretty good situation. I mean, look at his receivers he's got. You've got Mooney, Okay. You got Brian Pringle, who I think it's better. A Pringle is better as a potato chip than an actual football player. You got St. Brown in there. You've got Cole Kmet as the tight end. Okay, Khalil Herbert, you've got a backup running back. I don't see him having much trouble getting touches. Touches equals production. Touches equals points, and points equals wins. So to me, I see him as a solid player down where he's at in the low 20s, low RB2 rankings. Man, give me Monty all day long and give me a couple years out of him. And if he moves on in a couple years at his price point, I'd rather get a guy like that than spend higher dollars on a player that's in a similar situation, rebuild or not. I think Chicago may be rebuilding, but they got 2 more years with him. If I'm a rebuilder, if I'm a contender, or anything in between, I don't mind picking up Monty. I'm actually more of a buyer than a seller. That's my opinion on him.
And he caught the ball very, very well last year. Ran with the ball after catch, surprisingly better than I thought he would. So Steve, you may be onto something there. I've been trying to get on. I tell you, last year before our main event in Louisville, we have a 1-day draft on Sunday. It's part of our main event at the Hard Rock Casino in Cincinnati, where we encourage everyone. It's August 20th this year. If you don't want to come to Louisville for some reason, I can't imagine why you wouldn't. But if you can't, Cincinnati is the place to be. And we'd love you to come to both. But, I had a young man, it's a good friend of mine, helping me at that draft as a facilitator. And one of the drafters mumbled J.K. Dobbins. And this guy that was facilitating turned around and said C.K. Diamonds, which we all got a great kick out of. But one guy went ahead and named his team C.K. Diamonds. But, Dobbins has been anything but that. So I've been searching for a man in this backfield that can answer the situation for me. Do I want to draft any Baltimore Raven running backs? You did a great job breaking down Montgomery. Well, you want to take a crack at Diamonds and Dobbins? And yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of weird. I mean, Dobbins came out, was highly drafted. And he came out and had a pretty good end of the first season. I think Dobbins is one of these guys that people had that arrow like pointing straight up, Dobbins. And then he had an unfortunate knee injury preseason. Then Gus Edwards went down. You had Lamar Jackson in the Baltimore situation that either got sick or had COVID. I think there was that spot where they showed him running off to the bathroom, holding his backside, like, oh, God, I think he had to poop or something. I don't know what his problem was, but they're like, oh, we don't know what's wrong with him. And somebody's like, oh, I think he went to the bathroom. He's okay now. But then he didn't have COVID. And so then you had Marquise Brown blowing up as a wide receiver. He's been 3 or 4 years, and we're waiting on him. And all they had left was Andrews. So Baltimore's tricky because that's a good situation where they're almost using him like 60-40. It seemed like they were using 2 guys. So it's really hard to place Dobbins. If Dobbins got the work, he could easily be a top 10 kind of guy. But if he doesn't, he's in that backpack. And again, if you're looking at the price tag for like a Dobbins versus Monty, I almost want to lean towards Monty because his price tag's cheaper. If I can get a guy that I can start as an RB2 over a guy that's Dobbins that might be a little bit higher, that's a tricky situation. We'll have to see what they do in Baltimore, but that's a tricky situation. Same thing. They don't have a lot of talent around them. They've got Lamar, who does a lot of running himself. But Dobbins is a really tricky one. So he's a guy that I would trade away. If I got full value for Dobbins and I can spin that for something else, I'm probably going to sell more him than I would sell Monty at this point. If I can get full.
I've been avoiding him the whole way. Balky, are you feeling much better about your early shares of Montgomery now?
Yeah, well, totally. I was. Here's what I did. I played devil's advocate, so Steve could come on and say, "No. Listen, you're wrong about Montgomery. Here's and all the while, I just wanted him to give me that fuzzy, warm feeling about Montgomery, and now I feel a lot better about it. In Dynasty startups, I can tell you this right now, gentlemen: J.K. Dobbins, running back 14, David Montgomery, running back 20, 3.5, 3.5, middle of the third round for J.K. Dobbins, end of the fourth round for Montgomery. Wow. So there you go. 4-time FFPC Dynasty champ saying, look at Montgomery round and a half later rather than J.K. Dobbins in the startups in the middle of the third. We're talking with Steve Paratore, a 4-time FFPC Dynasty champion here tonight. Let's talk about tight ends here. Evan Engram, no longer in New York. He's in Jacksonville. Someone called that a lateral move. I don't know how you fall in on that, but it is Trevor Lawrence versus Daniel Jones. What's the likelihood he has a nice bounce back season this year, Steve, catching passes from Lawrence rather than Jones?
It's all about health with him. The poor guy's had a lot of health issues. He's had some craptastic coaching, craptastic offensive coordinators. Daniel Jones is not really proven to be anything, but now you've got a second-year guy, and Trevor Lawrence is coming out of a craptastic situation with a coach that really just destroyed the team last year. So Evan Ingram, if he stays healthy, I think he's going to way outproduce his ADP. I mean, give me some shares of him if I can buy him on the cheap. But again, look at the same situation. They picked up Kirk as their number one receiver. To me, he's a wide receiver 2, maybe a low-end 2, maybe a high-end 3, and he's got peaks and valleys. Marvin Jones, Zay Jones, LaVisca Who. I mean, they don't have a lot of pass catchers, and their situation is opportunistic. Again, if he stays healthy, and you've got ETN coming up now and James Robinson still, but as running backs, who are the pass catchers? I mean, I could easily see Trevor dumping the ball off a ton of times, that guy going across the middle. Again, it's all about health. If he stays healthy, I think he's a good guy that could outproduce his ADP. If he's not, he's going to be Jag. He's going to be another Jag. He's going to be in that low 20s. People are going to trade him for peanuts or let him go or drop him, because even in FFPC where you're getting that extra half a point bump, if he's not catching the ball and he's not scoring, he's not getting yards, he's on your bench. He's a waste of space. But if he stays healthy, that's a good situation. It's a 1-year prove-it deal, I believe. Is a 1-year prove-it deal, guys, right?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
To me, I think he's a buy at his price. I think he's one of those guys that you can kind of target as your tight end 2, maybe you get lucky, get him as a tight end 3, and see what happens. I wouldn't count him as a tight end 1, but he's a good one to buy in my opinion.
Perhaps he'll show up at the tight end boot camp down in Nashville this year and hang out with some of these guys that play some gutsy NFL play. I'm not so sure Luke Farrell in his second year is going to let this guy see much of the field. I don't know. It's just something I'm thinking about. Something else I've been thinking about. It's into making your rookie picks relative to the opponents that you play in your league, and how you've been in these dynasty formats for years. You now know, you're kind of like the NFL general manager. You know what the other guys like, and you have an understanding of what they're going to do and how it affects you. How much of what for lack of a better word, you might call playing poker with the owners in your league are you actually doing? Are you getting into their mind and drafting players? And do you draft players with the idea, I'm going to draft this guy because I know the owner sitting in spot 10, he'll want to trade for him and he'll give me a lot for him?
Yeah. I guess I'm a very ageism guy in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So when it comes to getting younger, when it comes to making a trade, I don't want to get off the subject of value, but I had an orphan that I picked up this offseason, and one of the best assets I had was Cooper Kupp. And I'm going, I don't want to start a guy that's going to go into his age 29 season and build around him. So I reached out to a guy that had an open guy, DK Metcalf, and I ended up adding a pick to it, even though I think the value was the other way, and the guy took the deal. To me, I had an extra second-round pick this year. This year's class I'm not really overly fond of, so I was able to flip like a middle second and Kupp. He's happy. He's more of a contender. I got a heck of a lot younger. Unfortunately, about a week later, Wilson got traded. Now I got a 24-year-old instead of a 29-year-old. So ageism to me in Dynasty football, to me, is very important. So I value rookie picks more than, say, the average opponent. This year, with everybody down on the 2022 class, a lot of times I flipped them for future years. I'm very, very good with trading future picks. So if I have like an early second last year and I trade it for a first-round pick next year, sometimes that pick becomes a really high first. Or if I'm trading a couple of thirds for a second, I'm like trading and getting a higher draft pick and hope that I can flip them and flip them and flip them. So sometimes if you start that process a couple years out, you can move up and you kind of move up in the drafts. That's what I end up doing, and getting Chase and getting the Pitts and getting some of those guys. Even if you're a contender, you trade some later round picks, maybe a small piece, and get a third round pick and move up for a second one. But I personally value in any format, whether I'm a contender or whether I'm rebuilding or in between. There's nothing worse than being in between as a dynasty guy. But for me, I like to trade up. I like to trade Like I said, sometimes current picks for the future picks, even last year's round, sometimes to do that and flip it and then you wait. Sometimes Dynasty, everybody wants go, go, go. And a lot of people have that redraft mode to go to Dynasty. To me, I think short and medium and long term, a lot of times I'm a long term guy. So
do you, Steve, when do you feel like if you value rookie picks more than most of your competitors, do you feel like there's a sweet spot during the calendar year to trade those picks, for more picks, or if you're trading this year's picks for next year's picks? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, when are the rookie year picks worth the most? Is it right after the NFL draft? Is it the build-up to the NFL draft? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's consensus. I think the closer you are to your actual draft, the more expensive those rookie picks are. And I think conversely, your future year's pick, the least expensive time is in the middle of the season. So if a player needs a player, somebody gets injured, you can offer a lesser valued player for a higher valued pick. You're coming up on the championship. I think you get in FFPC, you get to double digits. You get that the week 9 or 10. I can't remember. They changed it last year. I think it's 10 or 11. You get to that cutoff in that trade period. It seems like that's almost the least expensive time to buy a future draft pick, is when you're active and you've got a guy, say you're a middle of the road team, and you're saying, you know what, I think if I make the playoffs, I'm not going to make the money. The idea is to win or to make money. So the idea is, to me, is I don't want to be in the middle of the road team and finish in 6th place. Yay, you get a middle picker the whole way. I'd rather either be dead last and try to fight for that 101 pick, or I'd rather win the money and finish in the 12th or 11th or 10th position to win the money. So for me, if I'm in the middle of the road, I want to trade a player, I want to get that future draft pick. That to me is when it's the least expensive. The most expensive is right now when people are high. This is Christmas Eve. Holy crap, the NFL draft in 24 hours. I'm not going to sleep tonight. It's like, holy crap, I'm going to go to bed and this. I'm so happy, So right now it's like crazy. It's like, and then you get these weird years like where 2022 picks, people are trading like the 204 for a future pick or the 105 for next year's future, because this year's class, mediocre, couple of high ends. You got a lot of flyers, but like last 2 years, you've had some really high end players. 23, now they're saying, it's going to be a really good year. So it seems like there's a premium. And you used to have to pay a premium. Say you had the 10th pick, you might get an extra second on top. Now you might have to add a second to your 110 to get a future first. So some of it also depends on the year. What I'm hearing in Dynasty League football and football guys and Dynasty nerds and all these other guys out there, everybody's promoting this, and it seems to be the consensus. And me, I'm not a smart enough guy to make my own decisions. I have to use the tools that I have and listen to people and podcasts and other stuff. So
you listen to this show then, obviously.
Steve, do you think, and this has been, I don't want to say polarizing, but I think people have different opinions on this. Well, we've had people come on this show before and say, look, if you manage your dynasty teams right, you'll never have to rebuild. You can contend for a title every year. We've also had other people on this, come on this program and say, I'll go all out and sell out for a win. And if I get it, if I get it, great. If not, it might set me back a year or two. Are you of the opinion that if you do things the right way, you can contend for a title in the FFPC and your 12-team dynasty leagues there every single year?
Yeah, I think if you're really good about it, I think with a short bench and you get mostly a 7-round, I'm not talking about the ones where you're best ball or anything like that. I'm talking that traditionally you have 7 rounds. That's pretty good. You have a short bench in most leagues. You have to keep a kicker and a defense. So technically you're only keeping 14, offensive type players. Superflex, maybe a little bit less with the quarterbacks. But yeah, I think you get a lot more rookies, and in a really good class, you can build a team pretty quick. I mean, I've taken a couple of dog orphans in FPPC and turned them into winners in 2 years. I mean, it's easier in this format in the FFPC because of the short bench and because it's hard to keep players. And so with a lot of picks, you can trade. Most owners are pretty active. You can find a good trade partner here and there. Most leagues, if not, I've had to move on from a couple leagues, but then I find a couple leagues that are more active. The more active, the more you can make things happen. So yeah, and I think you could retool. I don't think you need to be a rebuild or a contender. There's also retooling, and I think what I was talking about with getting younger, I think I always want to try to retool to get younger. If I'm a top 2 or 3 and I'm all out and I want to buy a 30-year-old running back that's still a top 10 guy and get him for a second or first round, and I'm not 30, but like a Kamara or something like that. Most of my rebuilds, I'm not buying Kamara for almost anything. most of the guys with Cup, same thing. I got an orphan with a couple of good assets. I'm not going to buy Cooper Cup. I'm going to sell Cooper Cup. So FFPC, I do believe you can contend almost any year. But again, I either want to be first or I want to be kind of towards the back. That middle, that contender where you're not a top, if you're not a top 3 or 4 team, to me, I kind of want to sell off assets and try to push for a lower team to get a higher draft pick.
You know, Balky, now that the Headbanger has released all information about how to be successful in Dynasty, we've obviously asked all the questions in Dynasty that need to be answered. And I'll tell you, Steve, the one thing I love about Dynasty players is you guys have impeccable memories. You guys can go back and you remember it all better than most fantasy, most redrafters. So I'm going to say that I would like us in a few years to return to this 2022 draft class, because I've been hanging around draft classes a long time, and this one is taking some criticism. You know, everybody wants to give that a bit of a buyer beware situation in this draft, and I look forward to 5 or 6 years from now when these guys are dominating the Pro Bowl, because that's probably what's going to happen. Because I see a lot of good players here, especially in the players that in Dynasty and in fantasy football we make our points at. Balky, you got emails?
I do. I have a couple of them here for you, Steve. The first one actually is we're going to go back to the Ravens. I feel like we've been talking about the Ravens a lot on this show lately, but the listeners want to hear it. So we're going to give it to them. Art in Burbank, California. Hi, Steve. Who's the best value among Ravens pass catchers this year? Now, let's answer this in a dynasty standpoint, and I'll give up the ADPs on these guys right now. So we'll center it on Mark Andrews, obviously, who's one of the biggest pass catchers there. He is going at the 204 in dynasty startups. You have Hollywood Brown, who is going at the 708 dynasty startups. And then Rashad Bateman, not making this up, 707. They're going right next to each other, 707, 708. Between Bateman and Brown in the mid-7th, and Mark Andrews, Steve, all the way up in the early 2nd. Do you have a favorite value among those 3?
Yeah, value's tough. I mean, Andrews is just going to ball out. I think he's 25 years old. He's their number 1 pass catcher, dominant guy. He's just coming into his own. He's outperformed. So, you know, he's already the tight end 2 behind only Pitts, I think. So value, you can't say he's a value, because if he's at the tippy top, it's hard to say he's a value guy. To me, Marquise Brown hasn't done much in 3 or 4 years. He kind of shows up, blows up for 3 or 4 games, or 4 or 5, 6 games. He would have been a perfect sell after week 6 or 7. I would have sold him for all kinds of money. Unfortunately, I never had any shares of him. So to me, the only answer is Bateman. I mean, he's a younger guy. He's coming into a second-year guy. He's got more prototypical number 1, wide receiver 1 for a team size, whereas Brown would be more like a number 2. For me, it's no question. I mean, it's Bateman all the way for me. I mean,
were you in your rookie drafts last year? Were you on Bateman at all? Is he a guy you targeted? Oh
yeah, I have 2 or 3 shares of Bateman. Matter of fact, one of the ones I was in Superflex, I had multiple first round picks for this year's, and I think I traded up to the 202 to traded them like 3 future second picks, 3 to go up to 202 to get Bateman, and the guy declined, and I went to 203 and he was still there, and I think I went to 204 and I made the same deal 3 times, and I finally got it, Bateman, yay! And that picks were like they became 212. 211 and 210 or some crap. Now, good luck. I'd rather have Bateman than that, because again, come September 7th or 8th, I got to cut 3 or 4 of those guys anyway. So for Bateman, it's in a good situation. Bateman value all the way. That's an easy for me. That's
Bateman has said a lot of encouraging things about the way he has matured in that first year and how he's prepared. And Baltimore, to me, is very difficult on rookie receivers, because they're asked to be very physical, and they were never asked that in college. And so I think he's learned how to not only play in the NFL, but how to be a Baltimore Raven. And yeah, you may be onto something there, Steve.
And Steve, you bring up the cut down, and that's this next email we have for you. Last email, actually, we have for you. Gordon, beg your pardon, Gordon in Tallahassee. Since you have to cut down to 16 players in the FFPC, how does that change the way you operate your dynasty team, Steve? Nice work in the FFPC. Thank you to Gordon in Tallahassee for listening and emailing. So this is weird because, now not weird, but like I play in some private dynasty leagues. I play KFFSC Dynasty, obviously. And you get 22 spots in that. So it's more of a traditional dynasty league. FFPC is a little bit different because you got to cut down to your core. And I think, and Steve, I don't know if you play in any other dynasty leagues where you don't have to cut down to 16, but this has to change not only the way you think about cutting down, but the way you manage your roster throughout the season, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm only in a couple of smaller leagues, and I'm talking smaller, like much, much smaller than FFPC. For me, a lot of times I'm trying to make 2-for-1 deals sometimes. So if I get towards the middle of the season, or if I got a guy that's coming on and all of a sudden after the third year, he has 3 or 4 good games, I'm going to try to pair that person with maybe another lesser person to move up to get one better player. So it's easier to trade a couple of people, maybe trade one lesser person for like a middle round pick, a third or fourth or a second round pick, whatever it is, if you have extra draft picks, and then upgrade. So to me, to get that player, to keep those 6th round, 7th round, 5th round guys, it just doesn't happen, because what happens is all of a sudden somebody breaks out and you're dropping fab, you're picking up fab money, you're looking on the waiver wire, you're making deals. So for me, it's all about studs in the FFPC. The higher the value of the player, the better off you're going to be. So if you can maybe do a 3-for-2, you trading 3 people for 2 people, and maybe one of them's a real stud. Or, again, I made a trade about 3 weeks ago. I think I traded away Javonte Williams and my first in a team that I'm kick ass, and I got Jonathan Taylor. So I got JT for Williams, and I thought, wow, what if they bring Gordon back? Well, that's not going to happen, right? They're going to back. Taylor's getting all the carries, getting all the load. He had all those fumbles in Wisconsin. Holy crap, he's going to fumble. He's going to be horrible. He's going to be terrible. He's just done nothing but dominate. He's going to his third year, I think. He's going to pass again. So, again, you take a value. And a lot of times for me, I'll take a guy that's shooting up the chart. So sometimes it's easier to sell those guys at a high and maybe pick up an equal or similar value pick and pick up draft picks. But to me, I try to consolidate, to do a consolidation down, or to get a player in a higher value. And that way, when it's cut times, you don't, well, these 3 middle of the road guys, God, I got to cut 1 or 2 of them. Where you got a stud, it's easier to cut the bench guy or the third guy and things like that. So.
All you, Farrell, for the last question for Steve tonight.
Oh, buddy, I don't want to let you go, Steve. Okay. I'm high on a lot of players, but I think we can always find one that we just do not want to be in business with. A guy that you will avoid drafting, a guy that other people might want, but doesn't fit any of your multiple dynasty schemes, teams, no matter what your roster looks like. Is there a guy out there that you've got the do not draft on?
For a draft overall for the rookies for this year?
Yes.
Yeah. This is a real tricky one, everybody being down. I'm going to answer this one a slightly different way. I think I'm going to avoid any running back that doesn't end with the last name of Hall or Walker.
Oh, okay.
80s band, like a headbanger band. Hall or Walker. But if you're not Kenneth Walker or Breece Hall, to me, I mean, there's so many guys that are just, they're going to be pass catchers, or they're going to be thumpers. They're going to be whatever. I don't see a lot of studs in this class. I mean, they're talking about how deep it is, and that's great if you're going to be a kick returner, if you might want to be a punt. Maybe you're going to be a third guy in the bench behind Derrick Henry and somebody else. So if you're not Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, to me, it's almost like an avoid running back year. Maybe next year to get that running back. And if I'm going to build teams, I'm going to build around wide receiver, super flex, of course, quarterbacks, tight ends if they're a decent class, and there's only 1 or 2 in this year I'm really looking at. So I'm going to be pounding on the wide receivers, most of mine. And I'm not telling 100% truth, by the way, Farrell. We're just kidding, right?
Yeah, I think that, yeah. I understand what you're saying. You're holding back some of your better knowledge for your website.
But for me, depending on where there's the landing spot is going to be critical with some of these running backs. But again, I could see a couple going into pass catching roles, but until we know what they are in the next, probably not tomorrow. I don't think you're going to have any first rounders. Everybody's talking about Hall to Buffalo, and if he does that, oh my God, he's going to be a top 5 or 6 guy. Well, good luck with that. But it's going to be hard for me to draft most running backs unless it's a perfect situation, unless it's one of those top 2 guys. I mean, Spiller just with his.
That's fair.
Yeah, Spiller with his craptastic, combine. And I think he finally ran at his pro day, and it wasn't really fast. And I just don't know about Spiller when he was like the number 1 guy, and he's just doesn't have that dynamic, that he just doesn't have any single one feature other than he does have a lot of production in college, which is tough to fight against that. So if you're a metrics guy, he's on your do not draft list. I'm not a total metrics guy, but man, he doesn't have it when I'm looking to draft somebody, maybe that middle first in almost any situation. I'd rather pick one of those receivers, and you're probably looking at Farrell. You're looking at some of those kind of guys and going, you might have 6 or 7 really good receivers in this class, but running backs, kind of on my avoid list.
I think Rich Eisen has improved his 40 time more than Spiller.
You might have healthier hamstrings as well.
Sure.
Steve, just real quick, Hudson Reeve in the chat room wants to know what pre NFL draft. What's the gap between Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker for you right now? Is it big? Is it small? How do you view those guys compared to each other?
Well, I'm almost, unless it's a really, really horrible spot for Hall, unless it's a super good for Walker, I'm almost always going Hall, almost in either most of my super flex leagues. And I've got the 102 and the 103 and 104 in some of those leagues. I think Breece Hall is going to go number 1 almost no matter what. And again, if he goes to a completely bad situation, you look at maybe Hall going to Buffalo or something like that, or Walker going to Buffalo, something like that. Man, you can almost see that. You could see that gap closing. I think the gap is closer than people think. I think Hall is your consensus 1 in both Superflex right now and standard leagues, and most of your best ball leagues for your 101 as of today. Tomorrow, I think by Friday we're going to know a lot more about landing spot. And again, landing spot, you'll see that change a lot. I'll end with one thing that I made a rookie mistake of 6 or 8 years ago or 7 years ago when I really started. I used to start looking at projections in January and going, wow, look at where these guys are going to go. And I had my sheets, and I'd focus on that top 4 or 5 guys. And I think sometimes we have to be careful of that, because then you have the combine, then you have draft nicks, and you have GMs talking, and then you have the actual draft. You have to be careful honing in on that one guy like Spiller. Oh my God, he's the 101. He's the number 1 guy. And all of a sudden now he's 3rd. He might fall to 4. I don't think he's going to fall below 3rd running back this year. But you look at where he's going, the 8th, 9th pick overall, super flex, maybe 10th, 12th. You're looking at a guy that used to be number 101, maybe in January. Now you're looking at the guy going, he's 3rd, maybe, like I said, 10th, 12th overall, depending on your league. Running back needy teams might take him 4th or 5th, and that might be a mistake. So you just got to be careful with those kind of things. So.
We will never be careful with the advice that you give us tonight, because we were going to subscribe to it like it's gospel. The 4-time FFPC Dynasty champ, Steve Paratore. Follow him on Twitter at Steve Paratore. Steve, thanks so much. I know you had a busy day today, and I know you probably got a busy day tomorrow as well. But NFL draft tomorrow, man, it's going to be great. And it's so good that you gave us the precursor to the NFL draft this weekend for all the high-stakes Dynasty players that tuned in tonight and that are streaming this later. Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it.
Bulky, Farrell, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and good luck in all your leagues this year as well, too.
Whoop, whoop. Thank you.
Steve Paratore, ladies and gentlemen, the 4-time Dynasty champ, 6-time FFPC league champ. Great stuff from him tonight, Farrell. I really love not only the passion, the entertainment aspect, which was off the charts, which was great, but a lot of good stuff, too. And I think that, and this is probably my fault, we don't do a whole lot. We don't do enough super flex on this show, because I think that really changes everything. Especially when it comes to rookie drafts and dynasty drafts and everything like that, that does change a lot. But he brought us a lot of good content about the running backs and about, how you as a dynasty owner should value your rookie picks in order to be successful.
And before we get off the air tonight, he'll be located at the lobby bar wherever he's staying in that hotel room.
I can actually tell you that. I can't tell you the hotel, but I can tell you he emailed me. He's already there. Yeah, for
he's
sure.
already at the lobby bar.
He is actually in North Carolina right now.
Man's got an expense account. He has to use it, especially if you're in North Carolina. You usually stay a little longer at the bar. So it's I don't know, Balky. What do you want to talk about now?
T. Higgins. That's what I want to talk about. Because and maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something, but I think it's worth bringing up. Zach Taylor was speaking to the media this week. He said he expects T. Higgins to miss all of the offseason workouts because he had the surgery on his torn labrum after the Super Bowl earlier this month. I think he was at a Cincinnati Reds game, and he was in a sling. Sure. These are not short recoveries. The surgery is not a short recovery. So you can't imagine that we'll see him probably until training camp How nervous are you, Farrell, knowing that he is going to miss so much time? Maybe not the most important time that he's missing, but he's missing a lot of time.
Early on, I saw T. Higgins going in the middle to the late of the third round. Now, Darren's mojo on him, you can share with us, Balky, at any time. But this team this front office, this head coach of Zach Taylor, the OC is Callahan. I think Troy Walters has worked himself up to a wide receiver coaching job. This player is going to need a lot of attention, and Joe Burrow is probably going to notice a significant difference in him, even though this is a minimally invasive surgery. You'll be in the sling for a number of weeks, and you'll be in a situation that there's two ways to have this injury. If you're a quarterback, I mean, Baker Mayfield has something similar. Major League Baseball pitchers have this injury all the time. It's just worn down by the consistent movement. In a receiver situation, it's usually a violent impacted hit, and that's what we have here with Higgins. And so a range of overhead motion decreases. It becomes painful, but it also becomes recurrent. You can't say that he's injury prone, but you can say he's injury likely just because of the contact. If you picture a guy like this elevating to catch a ball, falling head over heels, jamming his shoulder into the turf, he may not miss a lot of football time from a season standpoint, but he could be a disaster for fantasy owners in that injury, this type of injury could show itself in the first quarter, either knock him out of the game or make him essentially a decoy and a different route runner than what he would normally be. So I'm saying that Higgins is going way too high with this injury, and consequently Boyd is going way too low. I look at Boyd going with double digits in the never too earlies, and I was surprised by this because Boyd, even with a fully staffed wide receiver core there in Cincinnati, Boyd to me was the perfect best ball number 3 wide receiver.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway from this is maybe bump T. Higgins down, and when you're looking at Jamar Chase or Tyler Boyd, or you might want to break ties in favor of Chase and Boyd for that Higgins aspect as well. Let's get through some emails here tonight, Farrell. And by the way, T. Higgins in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, wide receiver 10. And to me, that does strike me as very high at the 305. So I am staying away from him there for sure. All right, emails. Nick, Fridley, Minnesota. Happy NFL Draft Week, guys. If Jameson Williams never would have torn his ACL, would he be your number 1 receiver in this year's class? Thank you for the email, Nick in Fridley, Minnesota. I've heard a lot of talk about Jameson Williams being the best talent in this class, Farrell. If he was healthy in this, would we be talking about him as the number 1 receiver being taken?
I think so, because like lots of number 1 players, elite players, responding to the training, responding to what they get with the speed training, I think he would have continued to do the right things. Consequently, he would be a challenge to Drake and Balky, who's our number 2 guy.
Well, I mean, Olave, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks,
he would be guys. He would have separated from those if not for any other reason. The fact that he played on the premier college program.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. And my co-host in my afternoon show, Leo Kuiper Jr. has been singing. Knows. Yeah, he's been singing Jameson Williams praises. He loves him. Loves him for the Packers too, by the way. Jimmy in Norcross, Georgia. I'm looking for upside here, gentlemen. Does Malik Willis have more of it than Matt Corral in my Superflex? Appreciate you, Jimmy in Norcross, Georgia. So looking at from the Superflex standpoint, Farrell, I know you like Matt Corral quite a bit. Would you still say he has more upside than Malik Willis? Because Willis to me seems like a low floor, high ceiling type of player.
No, Willis has done the work and captured the imaginations of the front office, and a lot of it has been attitude. The kid loves to play, and that's what you want to bring into your quarterback room, especially if you have an established veteran or a guy that's 30 plus years old and working his way out. I think Malik Willis, like a lot of quarterbacks that come out of college, is to be considered a project, but the basis of the skills are there. I don't see him making a huge difference as fantasy football producer this year. Even if he gets the opportunity, I think he's going to struggle some. Corral is working on several issues that he has as far as presenting himself as a leader, as a locker room guy. I'm still high on him. I like his talent. I think if he can learn how to be a professional, he'll go far in this league. And what I find interesting about the quarterback position, and Headbanger was just talking about he doesn't pay a lot of attention to it in January. Well, back in January, everybody was panning this quarterback class. They were just not interested. But these general managers, they cannot help themselves. And so consequently, these players are rising through the draft. And Corral hasn't even been physically available for some of it. And that's hurt him.
This one's from Balky in Appleton, Wisconsin. What about Kenny Pickett? Should we be concerned about him as a pro?
I don't know. He's going to get an opportunity. He's the landing spot situation. It doesn't look like it's Carolina now. And a lot of these players, if they get to double digits, they could slide. They could do the old Aaron Rodgers slide and keep sliding. Pickett's going to get his chance to play. I think he's going to be a very, very good player in the league. A very good player in the league means he makes a roster and stays around for a long time. And if he ever gets tapped on Sunday, we'll see what he can do. Whether he's going to be of any value to us in fantasy, we just don't know.
Dan in Willow City, Texas. Haven't heard you guys talk a whole lot about Pierre Strong. Could he be the sleeper of the running back class? Thank you, Dan in Willow City, Texas. Yeah, Pierre Strong. The more and I don't know why, because it's one of those things, Farrell's like, I'll stop reading or researching a player if he seems like an accumulator, if he doesn't catch passes, if he's super undersized. Like, those are probably the top three things that kind of turn me off from a running back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Strong is I don't think he fits any of those categories coming out of South Dakota. I think this is an interesting player. Who is it in me? I don't know who it was. I just saw it earlier today. Somebody compared him to LaShawn McCoy, his skill set. Then my ears perked up, and now, like, Leo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in Django Unchained. You had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
If he gets your attention, he should keep your attention. I like his pre-draft hype has been very much kind of like the personality he is. He's a very hard-working, humble guy that I think when we started the show, we talked about taking the draft all the way through the very end, going all the way through the free agents that are signed. Yes, this player could be a sleeper. This player could be a steal. He's the kind of guy that we look at with James Robinson, coming from a league that less than celebrated, but has all the skills. And you wonder what he'll do against a bigger opponent. I saw him play Indiana State this past year, so he hardly broke a sweat. But he is a terrific athlete. And when you take a look at the South Dakota roster and the student athletes walking around the hotel, and then you look up and see Pierre Strong, and you see an NFL player.
Final email we have tonight. It's another tight end question here. Willie in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Hi, Farrell and Balky. Is Jeremy Ruckert a thing? Do I need to use a pick on him in my FFPC rookie draft? You two are the best. Thank you so much, Willie in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Very kind of you. So Ruckert, I feel like we might have had one email where we might have touched on him about a month or so ago, but I for me, the tight end class, I'm not super excited about. And when I look at it, it's the kid from Virginia, it's Dulcich in UCLA, and then McBride. And then after that, it's kind of like, I'm not really excited about anybody. Am I wrong? Should I be paying more attention to Ruckert, Farrell?
Oh, you certainly should. This is the player that I look at, and I want to do right by this player. I'm just not sure if I want to do it right now. He sort of makes me think he's the 2020s Kyle Rudolph. This is a player that could do it, given the chance. Will he ever be given the chance? He was not a volume guy in college. He did not get to participate in the combine or his pro day because of either / an injury that he received at the Senior Bowl, or plantar fasciitis, which when you got problems with your feet, you've got problems playing all sports, especially one that was so key to the balance as football is. But I like this player. This is a landing spot situation, and I can't really tell you exactly what those landing spots would be, but he's
day 3, right, Farrell? Day 3 pick?
I think so. And given, we go back to Luke Farrell, who he played with at Ohio State, and it's these are very, very good players coming out of a very, very good program. I'm going to say let's don't draft him now. I'm going to say if you're short on tight ends after you like his landing spot, he's a mid to late 20s in some of your best balls. But this is a player you need to be aware of. And if you hear that he's going to be more involved, get a start for an NFL team about week 3 or 4, this is a waiver wire player that you probably want to be in business with, because he definitely has all the tools.
A guy who has all the tools, not only in running the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, but co-hosting the HSFF Hour, is Farrell Elliott. You follow him on Twitter at jfarrellelliott. Check out the KFFSC, kffsc.com. Join that Sunday night Run to Daylight, compete against me, Jason Kahn, FPI, all these great guys that we've had on the show before. And it's going to be a fun Sunday night for sure. Farrell, thanks so much for hopping aboard with me this week. We'll do this again next Friday for 2 hours.
That'll be great, Balky. I'll see you then.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Farrell Elliott, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football. That will wrap up our 2022 NFL draft episode. I want to thank Steve Paratore. I want to thank Farrell Elliott. I want to thank the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you. We're going to be back, as I just alluded to, 9/8 Central next Friday. It's an hour early because we're going to have full coverage of the FFPC Genesis and Revelations Classic Drafts. We'll cover Genesis for the first hour. We'll cover Revelations for the second hour. So it is a 2-hour bonanza here on YouTube next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. As a reminder, if you're looking for some action for drafting, either before, during, or after the NFL draft, the 2022 FFPC Best Ball Tournament has doubled its grand prize and its prize pool. $125 gets you in, and you can win $200,000 there. The slow 8-hour post-NFL draft Dynasty startups available. We got not a zillion of them. We probably got close to 24 of them going off on Sunday. Make sure you're registering for those at myffpc.com/dynasty. We have the Football Guys early bird promotion going on right now. Register by June 30th. Draft by July 15th, and you will get a free $35 credit applied to your FFPC account. If you want to do that up to 3 times, you'll get 3 free teams. It's just sort of how we appreciate you and show our appreciation for that. And then the main event, huge event this year, the biggest in season-long fantasy football history, as we are awarding $1 million to the first place finisher this year. If you register now before May 31st, not only will you get entered to the Pros versus Joes drawing, but you'll also save $100 off your first team. And if you get additional teams, you'll save $500 off each additional team, whether you're drafting online or whether you're drafting live with us over at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas this year. Plenty of slow, live, sit and go best ball options, all at myffpc.com. And, of course, the Run to Daylight Championship, the Draft Masters, and the KFFSC main event, $25,000 grand prize in that. Don't forget to register for that at kffsc.com. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you adieu. Your NFL Draft Weekend starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
One other thing, I'll bring this up, and I don't often talk about my favorite team on the show, but I'm sporting the Packers hat tonight. This is just a plea to Brian Gutekunst and the rest of the Packers scouting department front office. It's cool that you've ignored receiver all these years. Devontae Adams, no longer on the team. I'm begging you. You want to ignore it in the first round, fine, because you've had so much success in the second and third rounds. Please don't ignore it entirely. a trio of Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, and Amari Rogers, and Sammy Watkins, even if he makes the team, it's not going to win a Super Bowl. Please, 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 let's hit wide receiver position this year. Thank you, and good night.